Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Janelle's off tonight. First Interstate Bank said today it is freezing the bank accounts of the Crow tribe because the bank is uncertain who the tribe's leader is. That action, in which the bank calls an interpleading of funds, is in response to the battle between A.J. Not Afraid, the tribe's most recently elected president, and Carlson Goes Ahead, the vice chair, who says he's in charge following Not Afraid's alleged ouster. First Interstate says it's filed a petition in U.S. District Court to freeze the assets. Not Afraid told Q2 that he learned of the action Thursday, and he said he's planning to respond in court. Tribal employees were to be paid today, he added. Goes Ahead said he tried to get his name on the account to access tribal funds, but could not. It wasn't clear Friday night how much money has been frozen by the bank. Crow tribal leaders from each side gave different responses on the First Interstate filing. Q2's David J. joins us now with more from the chair and the vice chair. David?
Well, Russ, the confusion comes from actions that has led to two people claiming to be the Crow tribal chair. Elvin Not Afraid and Carlson Goes Ahead both gave us comments on First Interstate's filing. Chairman Not Afraid said First Interstate Bank's unilateral action has devastated the Crow tribe. Crow tribal employees were supposed to be paid today, and Crow elders were supposed to receive benefit payments. Now we have to go to the federal court to govern the Crow tribe's government. We also spoke with Vice Chair Goes Ahead on the phone.
First Interstate has done the right thing. It is not choosing sides in an unfortunate internal tribal dispute. This well-thought-out legal action by First Interstate is welcome relief to the Crow people who deserve to have their monies preserved.
The news release states First Interstate values its long-standing relationship with the tribe and hopes the dispute between Crow tribal factions is resolved quickly. Russ?
All right, thank you, David. Well, people on Crow Agency wondering what to do next after a large grocery store caught fire Thursday night. The Crow Mercantile, seen here as a staple for Crow Agency residents. Members of the community expressing concern. Other stores are at least a 20-mile round trip away. There's no word on what caused the fire or how much damage was done to the building. Many residents hoping the store can be rebuilt and reopened. A detective with the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office says the fire is still under investigation with the BIA. After a long night and day of negotiations, ExxonMobil and Steelworkers Union negotiators have reached a tentative agreement. That contract deal reached late this afternoon, avoiding any shutdown or potential strike for the time being at least. ExxonMobil workers rallied outside the refinery last night with the two sides negotiating until midnight. Those negotiations went on for most of the day again today before the tentative agreement was reached. Still has to be accepted by the rank and file, but employees remain on the job and the plant in Lockwood continues running at its full winter operation. The United Steelworkers Local also reached agreements with Phillips 66 and with CHS in Laurel on Thursday. United Steelworkers Local Chair Derek Weber and ExxonMobil spokesman Dan Carter say the 140 union members will vote on ratifying the tentative contract sometime next week. Neither had information about the local issues that were negotiated. All right, we want to turn to the weather now. It was a beautiful day today, but Bob, you're saying by this time tomorrow night, could be a much different story out there.
Things will be changing. We got up to 51 degrees in Billings today. A lot of 50s around the region. Tomorrow, we're going to get up into the 50s as well, but by tomorrow night, it all drops south, and we're looking at some snow dropping south with it. Look at this. This is our threat board, and look at all of the things we have. A winter storm warning, winter weather advisory, winter storm watch, all with various amounts of snow expected. But let me just kind of zoom in and show you what's going to happen in the Billings area. What we have here is basically all of our computer models, and you'll notice they all have different solutions for this thing. Look at this. We're looking at anywhere from maybe 2 or 3 to maybe up to 6 or 7 inches of snow expected by the time 10 p.m. Sunday night gets here. So we'll see what happens, but it looks like we're going to at least have a significant snow event. It's going to range anywhere from, I'd say here in the Billings area, anywhere from 3 to 6, according to all of these different computer models. We'll have the rest of your week's forecast, and it's a chilly one in a few more minutes. Russ?
All right, thanks a lot, Bob. Tomorrow marks the 30th anniversary of the Helena 1989 train derailment and explosion. The final NTSB report suggests MRL train 121 experienced electrical problems shortly after passing through Helena. Now, the heat in one of the locomotive cabs was knocked out, windows fogged up, made it difficult for engineers to see out. Crews decided to switch the order of the cars near Austin. That's about 11 miles outside Helena, to try and fix the problem. However, after decoupling from the locomotive, the car started rolling back down the mountain. Minutes later, the cars crashed into other train cars at the Benton Avenue crossing and exploded. In the moments after that blast, information was hard to come by at first. Emergency responders didn't know exactly what they were in for, but they jumped into action. When it was all said and done, those we spoke to say there were things that changed after that day for the better.
Former Disaster and Emergency Services Coordinator Paul Spengler says practicing for potential large-scale disaster has always been part of their preparedness plan.
I have to expect the unexpected that may happen, and that's why it's so important for communities to have disaster and emergency operations plans, have tabletop exercises where the major parties get together, the first responders, and talk about how they respond.
Current Lewis and Clark County Sheriff Leo Dutton was an EMT that day 3 decades ago, when it was no longer a matter of what if.
So it was an example of the worst case scenario and how you have to work. And it's not a, well, let's think about this. It was real for us that were there. That did happen.
The teamwork that sprung from necessity that day in 1989 led to solutions to problems that could no longer be considered a long shot.
The radio systems have been upgraded. Those things were an impetus of a better radio communication system. And when we upgraded this radio system, we thought about that day, that hour, and that moment when people couldn't talk and what could work and what did work.
We became a lot more active in working with the volunteer fire departments, a lot more mutual aid, I think came out of that incident, and how much we needed to have coordination and working much closer with the other departments.
We saw people with passion all of a sudden checking the generators. We saw people with passion all of a sudden making sure that their backup plans were there. So it did change us.
Well, a wrongful death lawsuit filed against the city of Billings is headed to trial. 38-year-old Richard Ramirez was shot and killed by officers in April of 2014. Ramirez was a passenger in a vehicle that had been pulled over by police. Drug paraphernalia was later found in the car. Ramirez ignored several commands by Officer Grant Morrison to raise his hands. Morrison thought Ramirez was reaching for a gun, but it was later determined that Ramirez was unarmed. An attorney for the Ramirez family argues that shooting was an excessive use of force. In January of 2015, a coroner's inquest jury ruled the homicide was a non-criminal justifiable homicide, and Officer Grant Morrison returned to duty. Now a trial date has been set for 9 a.m. on March 4th. U.S. Senator Steve Daines was in Helena today, where he addressed the legislature and spoke briefly to reporters about his priorities for Congress, from drug prices to border security. MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison was at the Capitol as well and files this report.
When asked what solution he'd like to see for border security and keeping the government open in 2 weeks, Senator Daines said he still thinks a partial wall along the southern border is a reasonable request. But above all, he wants both sides to compromise.
The right answer is to come up with a bipartisan solution. Nancy Pelosi said we're not going to negotiate until the government's opened back up again. The president opened it up again. And now it's time to get down to the table here and come up with a solution. There's 700 miles of wall right now down on the southern border. He's looking to add a couple hundred miles more. That's it. That ought to be a reasonable kind of issue to resolve.
Daines, a Republican, said border security is also key to helping solve what he calls a meth epidemic facing Montana. On legal drug prices, Daines told lawmakers in Helena that lowering them should be a bipartisan issue as well. Without specifying what he supports, Daines told MTN News that it may take a range of proposals to get the job done.
I don't think there's one silver bullet to solve this problem. It's silver buckshot. This is an opportunity here to take a lot of the middlemen out of the equation, to find ways the federal government can use their negotiating power to lower price. The bottom line is this: I want to see a result.
And Montana's junior senator had one more example of bipartisan cooperation he says may actually happen: permanently reauthorizing the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which has financed scores of projects in Montana. He said U.S. Senate leaders have agreed to put it on the floor next week.
But right now, I see a line of sight to get this through and get on the president's desk. It's been years of hard work with the different coalitions. We're very close.
Reporting from the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Senator Daines is up for re-election next year. Billings' mom and her 4-year-old boy are without a place to live after a toaster started their home on fire yesterday. And to top it all off, the family doesn't have insurance. Jill Fox tells us her home caught on fire just before 11 yesterday morning when she left for about an hour to run errands. She says the toaster cancel button malfunctioned and eventually sparked some nearby paper plates on fire, those flames that engulfed the kitchen. There's smoke and water damage throughout her home. In all, about $120,000 in damage. While her church and the Red Cross helped out with hotel rooms for a couple of nights, she says their home is unlivable.
Right now it's kind of overwhelming because I haven't even been able to comprehend what all we're going to need. Obviously we're going to need another place to live. So that will be my priority this week, is trying to find a place to live and do that, and just kind of being able to replace everything.
A co-worker has started a GoFundMe account for the family. That information is on our website, ktvq.com. Coming up on tonight's 10 o'clock news, after being rescheduled, the president has plans for his State of the Union address. What can people expect? Find out next. And in sports, 3 of the top teams in AA playing in Billings tonight. Scott shows us if Senior West or Skyview could slow them down.
You're watching MTN News with Janelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.